Welcome to Life and DNA with Amanda Renee. I'm so glad you joined me today. Let's get started. Hi everyone, it's Amanda, and today we are going to talk about Hashimoto's and thyroid disease. First, I'll just go over the symptoms of Hashimoto's. They are fatigue and sluggishness, sensitivity to cold, increased sleepiness, dry skin, constipation, muscle weakness, muscle aches and stiffness, joint pain and stiffness, irregular or excessive menstrual bleeding, depression, problems with memory and concentration, swelling of the thyroid, or some people call it goiter, puffy face, brittle nails, hair loss, and enlargement of the tongue. And I can tell you that in the beginning, I had every single one of those things. And I would add anxiety to that. Not just depression, but anxiety. Like panic attack kind of anxiety. Yeah, every single. And when it says fatigue, it's not just like, oh, I feel too tired to do that. No, it's like you physically can't hardly get out of bed. You're drained. I mean, it's like someone could take a vacuum and just suck the energy out of you. That's the kind of fatigue that comes with this. When I first started getting symptoms but didn't know what it was, I would literally have to guilt myself to get out of bed in the morning. Like, you have, like, you're almost like, oh, I'm going to get in trouble with my husband if I don't get out of bed. You have to, I'm a homeschool mom. I have to teach my children. Like, I have to get out and do this. This is the only way I could get out of bed in the morning because I was that tired. It was really, really bad in the beginning. Every single one of these symptoms, it's just, you list them off and you read them off, but if you haven't lived them, it's really hard to explain. The sensitivity to cold, for me, was more like, I mean, I have long fingers. I'm tall, so I have long fingers and, fairly big feet to begin with. But like my toes and my fingers will just stay cold. Almost always, year round. It's really, really, it's kind of annoying. I mean, I've dealt with that part my entire life, which is why I kind of wonder, you can have this for decades and not know it because it's kind of a slow build sometimes. So I think that I may have been dealing with this for a really, really long time and just didn't realize that because I've lived with some of these symptoms forever that it was part of anything. But after I gave birth to my son, and I had a miscarriage in between my two kids. It was, thankfully, it was very early on in the pregnancy, but still very devastating because I was having a hard time getting pregnant, which I thought was funny because my mom seemed to get pregnant at the drop of a hat. And I mean, having 6 kids. And one of my sisters was like that too. But me and 2 of my sisters had a lot of trouble getting pregnant. One just decided, well, then she just probably wasn't meant to have kids and got to a point where she didn't want kids now, so she's fine with that. But me and the other sister we had to really work at getting pregnant with our 2 apiece that we had. And we both lost one in between our kids. It's pretty weird how that happened. But So a lot of times things like that can trigger and make things worse. I also grew up with, I had ulcers my entire childhood. And there is a book called The Root Cause, I believe by Dr. Izabella Wentz. And I can double check that later. But I know I'll list it in the notes. I want to list all the books that have helped me in the show notes for this episode. But having ulcers for a long period of time can be one of the triggers for Hashimoto's. So but the big trigger, the thing that set my strongest symptoms and just brought everything to a head, I believe, was when I delivered my son, because it was kind of a traumatic delivery. A lot of stuff happened. I had a cold or severe sinus infection. My allergies would get really, really bad and turn into sinus infections. So 2 weeks before I was to be induced to have him, they gave me antibiotics, which in turn caused a yeast infection. So I had going in to deliver my child with that, because you couldn't use the internal medicine because I was pregnant, so I could not use like Monostat 7 or anything like that to get rid of it. So when I went in to get induced, on top of the antibiotics I was already taking, they gave me an oral pill for the yeast infection, which did not do anything for my symptoms, down there. And on top of that, the test that they give you, I believe it's strep B, that test that they give you before you're going to deliver, and it was always a negative with my daughter, but I popped positive for it with my son, so they had to give me antibiotics for that. So I'm loaded up on antibiotics, and I have to deliver him. And because of my age, it was so annoying, because I was fixing to turn 37 right before I had him, so 36. So I had to have an ultrasound on him like once a week the last few months of my pregnancy, and no one said how big he was going to be. So let's just say it was a traumatic delivery, and I got really super thin. I mean, I lost the weight I'd gained with him and more, but it wasn't like a good skinny. I looked malnourished. It was kind of bad. But breastfeeding him, I thought everything was fine. I thought I had a little bit of postpartum depression, but nothing I didn't think I could handle on my own. So I just kind of pushed through it. I had my daughter to take care of too, and all that, so I just kind of pushed through all that. Well, then a few years later, I start getting all these other symptoms, and ballooned up. I gained, I don't know, I want to say 60 pounds. I mean, it was crazy how much weight I gained in the span of like a year. It was bad, and it was not what I was eating at the time. There is no way I ate enough to gain that much. So I kind of started realizing something was going on. So now I'll talk about how I went about getting diagnosed. And I will tell you, for autoimmune diseases, it takes forever. 1, to get diagnosed. 2, to find a doctor that even knows about what your condition is and can help you with your condition. It is very hard. Back in, I believe it was December of 2016, so right before it turned 2017, I remember sitting on my couch, and for some reason, just I had my head back and had put my hand on my neck, and there was a lump there. And I was like, that's weird. Why would there be a lump in my neck? Kind of freaked me out. And it was, around Christmas, so I didn't have time to pay attention to it. So I ignored it. And then in January, started kind of researching and figured out that's where my thyroid was. So, and I knew everyone on my dad's side has thyroid issues. So I went to a local doctor to get it looked at, and he wanted to do an ultrasound on it. I got the ultrasound, and yes, there were nodules on my thyroid. And the next step he wanted to do was the radioactive dye to see if my thyroid is functioning, is it uptaking like it's supposed to. But thanks to insurance, they wanted me to have a fine needle biopsy first. That freaked me out. On top of, so this is when I'm still haven't figured out that my mom is the way she is, and I'm in her church, and so I'm thinking, well, then I need to stop, because she had me convinced going to the doctors was bad. I was a bad Christian if I did that. And the way she would do it, she would talking to me, she'd be like, oh, well, maybe you should go get that checked out. But then in another conversation with me, she would bash my sisters for going to the doctor, as if they didn't have enough faith to just be healed on their own. And so I saw that as, well, then that means I'm a bad Christian if I go to the doctor. That and my fear of needles kept me away for a while. But then I finally went and got it. My symptoms were too bad. I was going to have to go. I ended up seeing a different doctor, though. The first one, he was a little hard to understand. So I found a female doctor and went to her, and she ran my blood. No, that was later. She ran my blood work. I ended up talking to my gynecologist. That's what it was. Because the heavy menstrual bleeding was nuts. I mean, my periods were so bad. It was just getting scary bad. So I went to her. She ran and told her about the lump on my thyroid. She ran my thyroid numbers for me, which was nice. But she ran the full panel, where the first doctor I went to, he did the basic, TSH. Oh, it looks normal. Because everybody that has thyroid issues is thrown into that normal. So you can be way off, but they're going to tell you that you're normal. And so he just did the basic one. She did the full panel, which happened to test for the TPO antibodies. And sure enough, I had them. I mean, it was 133, which I've heard of people having them in the thousands. But if you have even one TPO antibody, you have Hashimoto's. And so looking at that and doing all the Googling I did once I got all those results back, that's when I knew that's probably what I had. I did go ahead and get the fine needle biopsy in 2019. and it came back, not cancerous. So now I just have to have an ultrasound on my thyroid every year so that they can see how big the nodules are. Hopefully they're shrinking. Honestly, it depends on the day on how big the lump will feel. I mean, you can't tell just looking at me that I have it, but it's not that big. But if I lean my head back and feel, then I can feel it. And some days it's bigger than others. I'm guessing that means my body's attacking my thyroid more on those days. In 2020, or I believe it was 2020, was when I was getting so tired I couldn't hardly get out of bed. My anxiety and depression were real bad. Real bad. I mean, I know, yes, it was during COVID too, so you had that on top of everything else. And I was getting scared. That and the weight gain. I mean, it was ridiculous. My face, when it says puffy face, my face was, and still is, that's the hardest part for me to lose weight in, is my face. My face was just very puffy to the point where I didn't even recognize myself in pictures and stuff anymore. It was real bad. So I went to the doctor. She ran like a full panel on me, I believe. And it turned out I was so anemic, something I'd struggled with before, never to this degree, but especially during pregnancy, I always had to be on iron tablets and they had to watch my iron. But I was, because of the heavy menstrual bleeding, I was so anemic. She said if I would have been even slightly lower than I was, she would have rushed me over for a blood transfusion. That's how bad it was. So she got me on iron and on a medication to stop the bleeding because I needed to let my body recover. And that was back in 2020. It's 2023. So it took 3 years. Only in my last labs was my iron up enough that they told me I could stop taking it because I'm still on the pill that keeps me from bleeding. So I am not losing, but I'm just now built up enough in 3 years to where I can stop taking that. I finally found, after all that happened, I knew I needed to find a doctor that actually knew about Hashimoto's. I mean, I live in a small town. The doctors here hadn't really dealt with it much. The doctor I started going to had heard of it, but she had never studied it or really treated it specifically. So, again, on one of my Facebook groups, I asked if anyone had any recommendations for anyone in Oklahoma, if there even was a doctor that could deal with it. And they recommended a place called Fusion MD in Del City. And I found a doctor there, and she helped me so much. She got me on one medication that helped, but then she decided to take off to stay home with her kid, which, as a stay-home mom, I think is awesome. But I was sad that I was losing my doctor. But then it turned out the one that replaced her, or the one that they sent me to after she left, her sister actually has Hashimoto's, and so she's very well versed in it. So that ended up kind of being a blessing. But my doctor there, the first one I went to, at this time my allergies were crazy. Like several times a year, my allergies would get so bad I would end up with really bad sinus infections down for weeks with this stuff. And this would happen multiple times a year. It would also happen when I exercise. So while I'm trying to lose weight, and exercise and build my strength back up, if I went too hard, it would send me into a flare or flare up my allergies. So this doctor put me on LDN, or low dose naltrexone, and that was a game changer for me. I was able to, between that and the Singular that my regular doctor put me on for allergies, with those two things, my allergies are next to nothing anymore. I mean, it's nothing compared to what it was. Every once in a while, I'll get kind of a stuffy nose and sneeze and have a flare up, but it is nothing like it was before, and that was awesome. And so that doctor that gave me the LDN, she's the one that officially diagnosed me with Hashimoto's. And last year, I started having weird heart issues that kind of freaked me out. I had every test under the sun. Every test except for the one my doctor wanted me to have, which was the table test. Because I was thinking, based on my research and what I had kind of looked into, that I might have POTS disease, just because of how my heart was acting. But physically, there wasn't anything really wrong with my heart, thankfully. But it was doing some weird things. So I've been trying for years to get to work out. But when you have Hashimoto's, you have to be so careful. And you can't overdo it. If you overdo it, you're going to send yourself into a flare. If you do the wrong things, you can send yourself into a flare. And then you're down for weeks, and then you've lost everything you accomplished. So it's frustrating. But I am not giving up. I always go back and start. But you have to really pay attention to your body and wait for the right time. But anyway, with my heart issues, I had gone back to the gym. I was doing good. I was taking these classes. And then I noticed, again, I would feel sick. Like it's almost as if when my heart rate got up too high, it's almost like it stirred up something hidden in my body, is what it felt like, because I would have an allergic reaction to it. My allergies would start acting up. And I've tried Googling that any way that I can possibly word it, and I can't find anything on that, but that is what it does to me, and that's how it feels. So I started really watching my workouts and keeping track of my heart rate. I mean, my heart rate was getting up to over 180, and when I Googled that, it said that was really dangerous, especially for a woman my age, in her 40s. That was not good. And through trial and error, I noticed if my heart rate went anywhere near 150 or over, that was going to make, I was going to be sick. My allergy stuff was going to be triggered. That, and I love yoga, but what's the one pose that every yoga teacher, every yoga class has 20 times in it? And that's downward facing dog. And I would notice every time I would do floor work like that, where you have to be bent over for longer periods of time, I would get the same feeling. My heart would feel weird and like flutter. And then I would feel sick again. So all of this was freaking me out. And then at the same time, of course, I'm still doing my DNA and genealogy research. And around the same time, I find out that my great-grandmother on my dad's side, so my grandma's mom, had thyroid issues. I mean, I kind of already knew that, but then I was researching her, and she died of something wrong with her heart. And then when I put the two and two together, that she had the thyroid condition, but either she couldn't get her medicine or she wouldn't take her medicine. And I mean, but we're talking, what, the 1950s? I don't know how far along the medications were back then. But after talking to my aunts and doing a little Googling, your thyroid can affect your heart. Like if you let it go and you don't get it under control, it can cause heart damage. And in researching her and looking through family pictures, I found a picture of her, and when I zoomed in, I swear you could see, I think she had Hashimoto's. And of course I don't think that was even diagnosed back then. There was a lump right where her thyroid would be. There was a shadow there in this old black and white picture. And I believe she had Hashimoto's. And if you let that go untreated, then it causes heart damage. And so putting that together with me having heart issues last year at the same time really freaked me out, because she died at the age I was last year. So I got really scared, and that's why I went and had all the tests they could possibly run. I had them done because I was really hoping that my wrong belief about going to the doctors had not kept me from going and, not had damage done already because I waited too long. I was really scared of that. So, thankfully, all of my tests came out fine, and I just realized, okay, I can't work out real hard or for real long. No more yoga, because all the inverted moves just aren't good for my heart for some reason. And personally, I believe that might be the extra weight that I'm carrying. So I think that maybe as I am able to lose weight, which is really hard when you have thyroid issues, it's really hard to lose weight. And I'm over 40. So there's a lot stacked against me. It sucks. But I'm determined to lose weight. And I have lost some. And I will talk about that in maybe in next Thursday's episode. Because losing weight is real different when you have an autoimmune condition and a thyroid condition. So for now, I just listen really closely to my body. And if I am even slightly, there's a difference. I know the difference in I'm tired, like a normal tired, and if I work out, I'll be okay. And when I'm like extra tired, and if I work out, I'm going to make myself sick. So I have to pay attention to that and choose when to work out, build up slowly, because if I get gung-ho, which I tend to do, and get excited and like, oh, this feels good, and let me do more, and let me go again this day, then I screw up, and I make myself sick, and then I'm down for weeks. So I have decided I'm going to try Pilates, because it's a lot of, using your body weight to build strength and build muscle tone, because lifting weights, doing weight training, like with Hashimoto's, cardio isn't great for us, because that's gonna throw you into a flare for most people with Hashimoto's. So more of the weight training but I could get a little bit of cardio in with the Pilates. So I'm going to try that next, and I am praying that that works. But I will let you know how that goes as I start it. But like I said, next Thursday, I will talk a little more about the weight, losing weight, all the gaining weight. I'll talk about that in next Thursday's episode. And I will list the Hashimoto's books in the show notes, like I said. They've helped me. I still need to finish the one that my doctor told me to read about the root cause. I always get the information part read, and then the part that you're actually supposed to implement to help you, I kind of get bogged down in and stop. But I need to go back and finish that. But I will list those in the show notes. And I will see you again on Tuesday. Thank you for listening to Life and DNA with Amanda Renee. Join me on Tuesday when I talk more about the family mystery, and we'll talk more in depth on Walter's adopted families. See you then.